This will be the first of two lessons discussing laminitis. And you may ask yourself, why laminitis? Why is this such an important topic? First, it can be very painful for the horse if they're suffering from this condition. Also, depending on the study you look at, some estimates are upwards of 23% of all horses will experience some sort of laminitis in their lifetime. And then others predict that upwards of over 1.6 million horses in the United States may experience laminitis each and every year. Now, we also know that nutritional management can be key in helping to prevent or resolve laminitis in our horses. So, what is laminitis? Well, to understand that, you need to understand how the hoof is built in the horse. On the left, you can see a picture of a healthy hoof of the horse. You can see the bones, particularly look at the coffin bone, and then the outer hoof wall, and then the interior is laminae, and they interlock to connect that coffin bone to the hoof wall. Now, during laminitis, these laminae become weak and they lengthen. And then due to the tension of that flexor tendon, which is very important so the horse can move their hoof very well, that tension will start to cause that coffin bone to rotate. So to see that in images, here again on the left-hand side is the healthy hoof. On the right-hand side is a laminitic hoof. You can see that coffin bone is starting to rotate down. In severe cases of laminitis, that coffin bone may actually poke through the bottom of the hoof wall of the horse. So you can see how this can develop into a very painful condition for our horses. Now, there are different types of laminitis, and it's important to remember this is not a disease. This is a systemic condition. Okay. So we have endocrinopathic laminitis. So occurs in horses with an underlying endocrine, so that's hormonal, conditions such as equine metabolic syndrome or PPID with insulin resistance, is what we used to call Cushing's disease. Then you have the systemic inflammatory response laminitis. So this is an inflammatory response in the horse, could be due to illness. Oftentimes we'll see it with horses that get grain overload in the hindgut that disrupts that microbial population in the hindgut, can lead to this. Retained placentas, so after giving birth, that is a concern if their placentas are retained. Colic, pneumonia, things like that can lead to this. Then you have supporting limb laminitis. So if a horse is, say, on stall rest due to an injury, that supporting limb is bearing more weight than normal, and that can develop to laminitis. Now, when you look at the data, over 90% or close to 90% of laminitic cases are endocrinopathic. So again, these horses that have EMS or PPID with insulin resistance are prone to or susceptible to laminitis, and that's because they have high insulin levels. Now, to help explain this, when the horse eats a meal and then it absorbs that sugar, that glucose into the bloodstream, the pancreas releases that hormone insulin and to reduce those sugar levels in the blood. One of the roles of insulin is to sometimes vasodilate, meaning the blood vessels get bigger, so you get better blood flow, or vasoconstrict. And when blood insulin levels are high, they tend to cause more vasoconstriction, so less blood flow. The concern here is when you get less blood flow to the hooves, to those laminae cells that need nutrients and oxygen, when that gets reduced, that starts to damage those cells, and then the laminae start to weaken and elongate. Then you start getting rotation of that coffin bone. So you can see the steps with high insulin resistant horses like EMS or PPID, Cushing's disease. These types of horses can be susceptible to laminitis. Now, our EMS horses, these are generally our obese horses in a body condition score of greater than 6, 7, 8, 9 range. Lean horses can suffer from EMS too, but generally it's seen in these overweight horses. They have the crusty necks, regional fat deposition around the body, and then again, insulin resistant. Our PPID horses generally are older horses. They have elevated levels of stress hormones like ACTH and cortisol, and again, that insulin resistance. Now, there are some dietary factors that can contribute to high insulin levels. So, generally, high levels of sugar and starch in the diet, you get high levels of insulin, which can lead to this problem. So, in pasture associated laminitis, in the spring and then in the fall, when our pastures green up, so our warm season grasses in the spring are starting to sprout, very lush forage, high in sugars. Then in the fall, same thing, those cool season grasses are starting to come through, or forages, and they're high in sugars. So that's going to cause a spike in insulin, which again, vasoconstriction can lead to damage of the laminae. Horses with EMS and PPID are more prone or susceptible during these time points, so you have to be very, very careful with that. Now, what are some signs of laminitis? The best way I can describe it is they're ouchy on their feet, and you can see some of these physical and behavioral signs: abnormal stance, they don't want to put weight on that ouchy hoof, reluctant to move, it hurts to move, their gaits are off, shifting weight, again, not wanting to put weight on there. Even you can see some social cues or behavioral cues where either they're isolated or they're falling down the social order in their herd because other horses see an opportunity to move up the ranks. Then when you look at the hooves, you can see some outer signs, so flaring of the hoof wall, rings on the hoof wall, stretch white line. I would advise, if you notice any of these, to always speak to your veterinarian and your farrier when you have concerns, and you want to catch these as early as possible. Now, in the follow-on lesson, we're going to talk about how we can manage laminitic horses, or even how can we prevent it from occurring.